Well, welcome everyone to the Clinic Efficiency Podcast. I'm your host, Donald Weeks, and today I'm joined by Jeff Petersen, founder of Petersen Physical Therapy, a practice he's been building and evolving for over 30 years. Jeff, what really stood out to me in our earlier conversation is not just the longevity of what you've built, but the depth of relationships you've developed with patients over decades, which is rare in healthcare today.
Yeah,
And I'm really excited to explore that with you.
cool. Look forward to it. And thanks for having me.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, Jeff, you mentioned something in our last conversation that stuck with me. It was the idea of the entrepreneurial spasm, that moment of think I can do this better. Can you take us back to that time? What actually drove you to start your practice, and how has that perspective changed over the last 30 years?
Well, I would say the perspective has definitely changed. I think it was more hubris and arrogance and ignorance that fueled that. They could.
Right.
So I've always been an advocate for kind of some measure of self-awareness. We perform and then we want to look at what we do. And honestly, I'm the type that will jump in with both feet before I check the depth of the water. But
Right.
it was working with patients and realizing that, I could do it better and in terms of not necessarily the business side, but give myself more freedom to build relationships the way I thought they could best be built with the patients and
Right.
with employees, because it really is a relationship business. And that was probably 1991, 1990, right around there. So,
Right.
I'm impressed with the young people I see now that come out of PT school. A lot of people lament the youth of today, but we have some young people that really offer me encouragement and motivation to keep working because I learn from them and they have such great attitudes. So
Yeah.
the awareness has improved. That's one of the things that changed, is that looking at the people coming into the profession, they're much more aware of, first of all, what physical therapy is and what they can bring to the profession. Keep in mind, I graduated from school in 1984, and physical therapy was still a fairly new profession. Wasn't it, I'm talking 10 or 12 years old at that point.
Right. Right.
The awareness of what we can do and the awareness within the profession of what we could do has evolved. So it was, that was from the book, The E-Myth Revisited, The Entrepreneurial Spasm. And I had that. And I thought, you know what, I can do this. I could do this. I wish I had read the
Right.
book first. I'll
Right.
jump
Right.
in and then start educating. But I'm glad I did at this point. There have been moments in my career that I wish I hadn't. But now at
Right.
my age, I look back and I think, you know what, I'm really glad that I did that back in the day.
Yeah. Well, you also said something really honest, that you've failed upward a few times and had to grow into leadership as the company expanded. How did that transition happen for you from being hands on with patients to now leading a team across multiple locations?
Yeah, and that's where when I look at the pain of my business, most of the pain is self-inflicted. So, I had this spasm of, hey, I can do this. I just need to treat patients and treat patients well. And I pursued some further education or in manual therapy to help me do that better, and got really grounded in a philosophy. And I just thought, well, all I need to do is bring people on and tell them to do what I do the way I do it. And that's how you reproduce yourself. That's how you scale your business. Well,
Right.
I could not have been more wrong. So then you start trying different philosophies of coaching and, the Bill Belichick model. I'm a Patriots fan, just do your job. And
Right.
though there is some merit to some of that philosophy, he's dealing with a different population. So I had to really learn, if I was going to build a team. First of all, I want to bring people onto the team that aren't just like me, that bring something
Hmm.
to the table that I don't have. And I want to be open to how they might want to do things. Being the leader really I think it was a former Marine who told me that and I didn't realize this until he told it to me, that you always praise in public and correct in private. I grew
Right.
up
That's true.
playing sports where all the criticism was in front of everybody. So if you messed up on a
Right.
play, the coach was not hesitant to tell you in front of everybody that you messed up.
Right.
That's just one aspect of interacting with employees. Bring people that have something different, but also being able to encourage and being able to correct and have difficult conversations, but do that more in private than in public.
Right.
And then
Yeah.
through
Absolutely.
reading, making sure that, who was it? Was it Peter Drucker who said, you want to not only get the right people on the bus, but make sure they're in the right seats. Sometimes we have
That's
people that
right.
kind of matched values and were well intended. They just were in a position that it was not the position for them to best succeed. So that
Right.
stuff for me, I've often said I'm not stupid, but I am kind of slow. So I'm a slow learner. Once I learn something, it's there. But it took me to
Right.
learn that part of a team, having a good team, making sure they're in the right seats and we're all pulling in the same direction, and we share the same
Right.
values. And that took some time for me to really learn that, and then not only learn it and then execute it. There's one thing about learning what to do, but then it all falls in the execution. So
Right.
that was my greatest challenge.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned that one of the biggest lessons you've learned is that life and business is a team sport. What does building the right team actually look like inside your organization today? And how does that impact both the efficiency and patient outcomes?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'll illustrate that with a story. One of the first team members that I hired years ago, and there's a couple things I've learned too about interviewing people because I've had about 2,500 employees. And one of the things I noticed is that baseball players, former baseball and softball players, make excellent team members because baseball is a unique sport. Now, keep in mind, I got kicked off my little league team because I was kind of a wise guy and I actually was teasing. I was making fun of the manager's mom who happened to be in a wheelchair.
No. Yeah.
And so now and I've told this a story to patients. I said, now look at the job that I've had for 42 years. I literally work with people who are disabled and in a wheelchair. And it always, we
Right.
just kind of chuckle and say, God always gets the last laugh. Well, I hired
That's right.
this employee, and he was running a clinic that I was working in with him, but he was moving into leadership. And I had a meeting, an evening meeting with my marketing director, and I got a phone call from him, and he said, "I just want to let you know we had a patient come in, and she was upset about something. I handled it. She's doing fine. I'm just giving you the heads up."
Right.
And Donald, I got to the point where I almost wanted to start crying because I was like, this is what leadership is to see a
Right.
problem, to recognize it and be able to take the initiative, understanding what our values as a business are and how we would respond. Because, we don't get many complaints, but occasionally people are unhappy with something, to be able to respond to that in a
Right.
way that was satisfactory for everybody. And then simply just tell me it's done. And so that makes a good teammate, someone who's willing to take more responsibility. And of course, with the responsibility is going to come some measure of authority. That's how you grow. You grow in your responsibility, then you get more authority, and then you get hopefully more reimbursement. So
Right.
that's kind of the example of what makes a good teammate. Someone who really wants to identify where the team is headed, what the shared goals are, and how we're going to get there. And they want to kind of do their job to help us get there.
Right. Yeah. Well, this was one of the most interesting things I think you said, that your business is high touch and relationship driven. And sometimes efficiency may actually work against that.
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you think about optimizing operations without sacrificing the quality of those patient relationships?
Yeah, and that is probably something that we continue to talk about each of our group meetings, is that
Hmm.
because efficiency can get in the way of relationships. And I noticed this
Right.
early on. Years ago, I used to work in the nursing home when I started my practice. And I see this with children, with horses, and with elderly patients. If you're in a
Hmm.
hurry and you want them to get somewhere and they're not sure of where they're going, you can't hurry them. So
That's right.
that's where efficiency, you want to be efficient. Listen, if we can get her to the gym, or if I can get this horse into a stall so we can eat, or I can get my dog into the car so we can go,
Right.
you really can't hurry that part of the relationship. So basically
That's
what we've
right.
tried to do is to make sure that everybody on our team understands, first of all, what the vision is for our practice. That's for the business. It's to create engagement in safe areas so that we can all have abundance. And then what our promise is, and our promise is always to meet the patient where they are and then help them move a
Right.
step forward. So instead of having the huge responsibility of healing a patient, our job is to meet them where they are and help them move one step forward. If they move one step, then
Right.
the second step is easier. So to employ people that buy into that promise. And what happens
Right.
is then each person who comes in contact with the patient can supplement and build that relationship. So if I have a receptionist and the patient comes in and they're not doing very well that day. I want the receptionist to listen to that patient, but then communicate with the therapist. You know what? They're not doing well. You might want to bump them up to the head of the list in terms of who you interact with. So having
Right.
everybody be on the same page and then communicating with each other, but it does take bodies and it takes
Right.
people.
Right.
One area is in the mode of communication via text. We've been using that a lot, and I finally embraced that. That's one way to improve efficiency in relationships. And with email, the challenge with that is, and I try to tell my staff, we only communicate facts via electronic communication. There's no emotion.
Right.
You know,
Right.
when we
That's
first started
true.
using it, it said, "Oh, so and so's angry at me." Well, why is she angry? Let's look at the email. The email might be short, but she's not angry unless she says, "I am angry." And so we really
Right.
train on how to communicate, not just face to face, making contact, using the patient's name, appropriate touch in safe places, but also in electronic communication, make sure we're just communicating facts. We're not correcting people. We're not chastising them. We're only communicating facts via that electronic communication. So that can help.
Right. Yeah, that's very good. Yeah. Well, you also shared a great story about introducing new systems and how even with new technology, people still default to sticky notes and old habits. So when you think about, yeah, exactly. So when you think about bringing things like AI or new systems in, what have you learned about how change actually happens inside a clinic versus how people think it happens?
Yeah, and I think that's the missing link is that interaction between human and machine. I have one PT who's as
Right.
old as I am, and she always refers to it as the machines. But when I started practicing, we everything was paper and pen. So we had paper charts, we had a
Right.
paper schedule, we had a paper. It was called a pegboard system for billing and collections. And we finally went to computerized and we got these nice laptops that were probably $7,000 at the time because now you can get a
Right.
laptop, I
Right.
think, under 100. But yet I would still get the sticky notes on my computer screen. And it
Right.
became the bane of my existence. And even today, people are still tempted to do that. So it's because of
Right.
habit. People form motor patterns, emotional habits. My wife suggested we go to a different Costco because the taxes were less. And the toughest thing for me is when I go to Costco, I know where I'm going to park, I know where I'm going to enter, I know the route. I have a little game. How fast can I get in and out of there? And can I get in and out of there for under $300?
Right.
Emotionally, it was a challenge for me to think of going to a different store because of the habit.
Right.
You start to introduce new technology and it's not enough to say, okay, here's our new technology. We're all going to use it. Or here are where the buttons are. It really does take continual communication to say, okay, how are you using it? How well are you using it? What are your frustrations? And for a new billing system, it probably takes us 6 to 8 months, 9 months before we're really using
Right.
it optimally. And sometimes I wonder if we are using it optimally and how to assess that. So that's the issue that
Right.
I have with any of the new AI stuff that, okay, how I know it's going to be helpful, just like computers have been helpful. The internet, when my practice is old enough, we were not on the internet. And when we came on the internet, someone said, you need a web page. I thought, well, why would we ever want a web page? We're not selling,
Right.
we're getting referrals. We have the yellow. That's
Right.
how people find us. Well,
Right.
I
Right.
would suspect many of your listeners don't even know what the yellow pages are because they're long gone.
That's true. I was right there with you though. I remember that as well, and not even having a web page or anything.
Yeah, and
So
and
yeah.
now I mean, you have to have a web page, you have to have some kind of presence
Right.
online to be able to allow people to communicate with you because that's how we communicate today.
That's right.
I mean,
That's
look
right.
at us, and remind me of where you are.
I'm in Jacksonville,
So you're
Florida.
in Florida, I'm in Arizona, and we're having a conversation, and we're having a face-to-face conversation. How awesome is that?
Exactly. I know. It's
Yeah.
awesome. Wasn't that long ago we didn't even have the cell phone. So that's really amazing.
It wasn't until my daughter went to college that I ever started texting simply because I wanted to be able to
Right.
communicate with her, and that
Right.
wasn't that
Oh, I
long
know
ago.
it. That's right. Well, you also gave a great analogy, I think, comparing AI today to the Betamax versus VCR moment,
Yeah,
where everyone knows everyone knows something that's right. Everyone knows something that's big is coming, but it's not clear which direction when.
It's something new, it's a new shiny object and we know it's going to be kind of cool. The whole idea of You're gonna be able to record from your television. You know, young people today don't
Right.
understand that. I mean, that's what you would do. If you had a favorite show, you couldn't just stream it whenever you felt like it. You couldn't wait till all the
That's
episodes
right.
were there. You had to be there at that time or you recorded it. And
Right.
so, I mean, think about how that's changed. We talk about habits, how the habits of even viewing entertainment has changed. And so, sure enough,
Yeah.
the higher quality was the beta version, the Betamax, and that's what I bought. And within a year, there were no beta movies; they were all
Yeah.
VCR. And within, I don't know, 5 to 8, 10 years, VCRs were gone. That's now antiquated. DVDs are now
Right.
gone; those are antiquated. You know, the technology is changing
Right.
so fast that with AI, I know there are different I know there's only a handful of databases, and I also know there's different products, uses of those. So I'm in a sense where I want to see what shakes out. What's different is that it's changing so fast that it's not
Right.
taking 4 to 5 years, it's taking weeks
Yeah.
and months for things to change.
It's crazy fast. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, how are you personally thinking about AI in your business right now? And what's making you cautious versus excited?
So we use AI. Our electronic medical records has an AI that it's kind of attached on top of what we're doing, on top of its
Right.
platform, and it works pretty well. I'm a little hesitant with the ones that are not embedded in a platform,
Hmm.
but I do use AI. I do use an AI application for. I just got through writing a book, so I use that as a transcriptionist. I probably didn't use it as well as I might have, but I basically used it as a transcriptionist. It wasn't great at
Right.
editing, so what I would do is then send it to myself via email, and then I would edit it.
Right.
And so there
Right.
may be a more efficient way to do that, but that's pretty much how I've used it. But it it saved me
Right.
from sitting at the computer banging away on the keyboard because that's a challenge for me because I'm not very efficient and I don't like the posture it leads to. But
Absolutely.
there are a lot of numbers. One of the things I tell young therapists that are opening their office, you got to get a handle on your numbers. And there are leading and lagging indicators for how well we're going to do. So I can look at our numbers and say, okay, next month's going to be a tough month because we haven't gotten those leading indicators up high enough, and I know our costs are going to be the same. I'm looking forward to having something that could look at across platforms and generate the key performance indicators that I look at and give me a quick graph for
Right.
that, or look at my P&L and
Right.
pull out my salaries and compare those to last year, or
Right.
give me a valuation on the term that they use to value businesses in PT is EBITDA. Give me a snapshot of that based upon what you see on my P&L. And I'm
Right.
sure it can be done. We're just working on how well does it work and how easy is it to navigate and how accurate is it?
Oh, I know. Yeah, I know. We do the same thing in my office. We actually take a day just to, you know, think about how can we do things better. How can we use the tools better and eliminate some of the things, the repetitive things that we're doing.
Yes.
And we keep finding things, all the
Yeah.
time. So it's
Because you
amazing.
get into habits.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
this is where I
Exactly.
stack my charts when I'm working on them. And then when they're done, they go on this side. And if they start on the other side, it takes me a little bit to get oriented.
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you shared a really powerful perspective. That pain is not just physical, it's an emotional experience, and that how someone thinks and feels directly impacts how they heal. How does that belief shape the way your team actually treats patients day to day?
Yeah, so we use the term, we never underestimate someone's sense of psychological safety. So people who come to
Hmm.
see us, they come to see us because they're in pain. And we don't
Right.
know what their mindset is. And the example that I give patients, if you and I are literally in the same room and we're talking, and I'm a physician, and you came to me for a vitamin B12 shot, and I prepare the mixture and I inject your deltoid muscle with a gauge needle, and you're happy. You have a little redness, it's a little bit sore, and you walk away happy. If you and I are talking and I'm just trying to be a wise guy and I pull out the same exact needle with the same gauge, but without your consent, I just jab it into your deltoid and inject an innocuous fluid and then laugh at you. You're going to have more redness,
Hmm.
more swelling, and the pain is going to persist for a longer period of time because in that
Right.
experience, you've been violated. So the level of emotional contribution to that pain is going to be much greater than if your mindset is, hey, this is a small wound that's helping me. So we want to
Right.
sensitize each of our whoever's dealing with a receptionist, perfect example. She's probably the person, and we call it the patient care coordinator, with the least amount of medical knowledge. But I still want her to be sensitive to someone who, let's say they're running late because it was hard for them to get out of bed. And if they took the work to get into their car and get down to see us, we want to be responsive to that. We don't want to be corrective and chastising. But in the past, I've had therapists arguing with, I mean, not therapists, front desk people, debating whether or not this was the right day for their appointment. And instead of just
Right.
accommodating, and particularly the older guys, and you're dealing with maybe a younger
Yeah.
woman as the receptionist, to say, just smile. He looks grouchy, but he's in pain and we don't know what's contributing to that. So as often, unless it
Right.
violates some sense of morality of the law, we try to say yes as often as possible.
Right.
So
But yeah, you have to show that empathy and understanding.
totally,
Yeah.
just because people are pain.
Um, yeah. Well, I know you've treated some patients for decades, even generations in some cases. What do you think creates that level of trust, and why is it so rare in healthcare today?
Yeah, it does seem rare that in the old days you had a doctor and that was the guy you went to see or the gal that you went to see, and they knew you, you knew them. I think in many respects we've kind of replaced the family doctor for, we'll do sports physicals. I have neighbors that I've done all their kids' sports physicals. Well, when their kid, sprains her ankle, she's going to come and see me, and then we see mom and dad, and so I think it is about
Right.
building a level of trust, getting some results, communicating
Hmm.
honestly, but to be able to say this is a more serious condition, and you really need to go see someone else, and not be afraid to do that and to say that. So to
Right.
offer a
Yeah.
resource and be able to give them referrals. Sometimes it's being able to say, no, this is going to take a few months for you to feel better. So hang in there. And then when they get better, they're okay. I remember he told me this was, I had a patient just say this to me on Monday. She said, I remember you told me it was going to take 6 to 8 weeks. And sure enough, on week
Right.
7, I felt better. So it really is about building trust. And the way you build trust is like any other relationship: transparency, authenticity. There's no other way to get around it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Now, you mentioned you're growing, but also facing the reality that costs are rising, reimbursements are tightening, and demand is increasing. Where do you see the biggest opportunity and the biggest constraint for your practice over the next 6 to 12 months?
yeah, probably the greatest constraint is finding therapists that share our values and will be good on our team. But then the other constraint is obviously lowering reimbursement, but that everybody's experiencing that across the board. So it's the balance of how do you increase, in the business terms, productivity, which in our case, our widget is a patient visit. How do you do more visits, but still maintain the quality, still build the trust, and still continue to maintain high quality? So there are things that therapists used to do in the past that we have to say, well, when I started as a therapist, I cleaned the tables, I did the laundry, I, did everything. So now you have to take
Right.
some of those tasks and say, okay, my tasks are best suited. I'm either seeing a patient or I'm documenting that visit so that we can get reimbursed. And then having people help us do other stuff that is less technically involved, but still at a level of engagement that allows the patient to feel safe. And if they have something they need to communicate, it gets communicated up those lines and it doesn't just get ignored. And again, having people that, I've often said the reason we're busy is because we do a good job,
Oh,
and
yeah.
so people will even come in if we're not that busy, there'll only be a handful of people there and they're looking around going, okay, what's the problem? So if we do a good, people are going to
Right.
want to see us. So
Right.
again, that becomes the challenge. So how do you get busier? Well, one of it is improve your skills. So for
Right.
a young therapist seeing a patient, it's going to take them a little bit longer to figure out, is this a tendonitis? Is this a tear? Is this a labral tear? I
Right.
haven't seen that many of them. As they get better with their assessment skills, better with their treatment skills, they are able to be more efficient with that part of the care. And you can
Right.
really dial in on, okay, what's going to be the most helpful for a patient. You don't have to have them there for months and months. You can get them in and help them, teach them to take care of themselves and get them up.
Right. Well, if someone is considering working with Peterson Physical Therapy, what would you want them to truly understand about your approach and what they wouldn't see on a website?
I would think what I look for more than anything is a level of, I presume that everybody has some baseline level of competence if they're coming out of PT school. They do a really good job of kind of screening that, and we can teach the skill. So I really want people that have a humble heart and a teachable spirit, and they want to work on a team.
Right.
So that's
Yeah.
kind of hard to measure, but sometimes you can kind of tell. It's like with a patient when you give an instruction and they say, yeah, but they haven't received what you've tried to give them. So
Correct.
with employees, we really want to have that. I think we have a pretty good system of screening that out for new employees. At the same time, you never really know until you've worked together for a little bit. And, it's it's the old bell curve. 20% of them are going to really they're going to be stars no matter what. Then there's a kind of a larger group that might need some education, some encouragement, coaching. And then there's a small
Right.
percentage of that we don't really want working with us.
Right. That makes sense. Well, Jeff, I think this has been an incredible conversation, and I really appreciate how open and thoughtful you've
No,
been,
thank you.
especially around the balance between the efficiency and the human connection. There's a lot here I think that clinic owners across the country would be, very interested in seeing
Thank you.
and relating to.
Appreciate it.
So it's very good. Yeah. Well, thank you so much
You're
today.
welcome.